Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Sleeping with the Dinosaurs. Tonight, we journey back more than 66 million years into the shadowed heart of the late Cretaceous period, where we will meet a creature whose very name still rumbles through history, Tyrannosaurus Rex. In this episode, we will walk alongside this magnificent predator, not as prey but as quiet observers. We will trace its life from the delicate speckled egg hidden in a nest of vegetation to the towering, powerfully built monarch of its domain. We will pause to marvel at the perfection of its design, the bone-crushing jaws, the vast muscular legs, the senses tuned to a razor's edge, and we will wander into the mysteries of its world, the debates, the discoveries, and the echoes it has left behind in stone and in story. Before we set off on our prehistoric path, I ask you to take a moment to lend your support to this expedition. If you enjoy our time together tonight, please like this video, subscribe so that you may join us for future journeys, and share in the comments below where in the world you are listening from this evening. It is always a joy to know how far these stories travel and how many minds they meet along the way. Now, breathe deeply. Let the present fade and step quietly with me into an ancient world. The ferns sway gently in a warm breeze. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a deep, low bellow rolls across the plains. The king is near, and our story begins. Close your eyes and picture the world as it was nearly 70 million years ago. The air is thick with the sense of life, damp vegetation, rich loamy earth, and the faint tang of decay where the cycle of nature continues its endless turning. Overhead, the sky glows a soft gold in the early morning, light spilling across a landscape unlike anything we know today. This is the late Cretaceous period, a time when the continents, though not in their modern places, have begun to resemble the world we recognize, and when vast inland seas and sprawling coastal plains divided and connected ecosystems in strange and beautiful ways. In the region that will one day become Western North America, the land is warm and lush, yet not tropical. Towering conifers rise like cathedral pillars, their branches forming green canopies under which ferns and cycads spread in thick carpets. Along riverbanks, flowering plants, the newcomers to the evolutionary stage, display vibrant blooms, and dragonflies the size of small birds hum lazily through the humid air. This is no empty wilderness. It is alive with movement, with calls and cries, with the rustle of leaves as unseen creatures move in the undergrowth. To walk here is to step into a symphony of sound. The distant trumpeting of a herd of hadrosaurs echoes like horns through the forest. Somewhere deeper among the trees, the heavy tail of an ankylosaur drags through fallen leaves, its armored back catching shafts of dappled sunlight. In the skies above, pterosaurs wheel slowly, their long wings catching the rising thermals. This land is ancient, yet it is also restless, a theatre where survival depends on constant awareness, strength, and cunning. And it is here, in this rich, dangerous world, that the Tyrannosaurus Rex reigns. To speak of T-Rex as a mere predator is to undersell its place in this ecosystem. It is the apex of apex predators, a creature not just shaped by its environment, but one that helped shape it in return. Its presence influences the behavior of everything around it, from the smallest scavengers to the largest herbivores. The Cretaceous climate is warm, but not uniform. In some seasons, storms roll inland from the nearby seas, drenching the land with days of rain and swelling the rivers. In others, the heat intensifies, drawing water into the air and leaving the plains dry and cracked. The plants adapt, some flowering quickly and seeding before the heat becomes too great, others relying on deep roots to find water far below the surface. For the animals, survival means moving with the seasons, herds traveling long distances to find food, predators following in their wake. We know much of this world not from written history, of course, but from the earth itself. Fossils preserve not only the bones of these creatures, but the impressions of leaves, the tracks of feet pressed into ancient mud, even the chemical signatures of the climate locked away in stone. From these clues, scientists have pieced together a vivid image of the stage on which T-Rex lived. The king's range was vast. Fossil evidence suggests it roamed from what is now southern Canada down through parts of modern-day Mexico, covering thousands of kilometers. This was no uniform terrain. The northern reaches were cooler and wetter, the southern warmer and more seasonal. Each region offered its own challenges, shaping the behavior of the creatures that lived there. In the north, dense forests gave cover for ambushes. In the south, more open plains meant speed and endurance were as important as raw strength. But wherever it roamed, T-Rex was a force of nature. Imagine the first hint of its approach, the faint rhythmic tremor in the ground, growing steadily until it feels as if the earth itself is breathing. Perhaps the alarm call of a hadrosaur rings out, sharp and urgent, triggering a wave of movement as a herd begins to run. In moments, the scene changes from stillness to chaos, the air thick with the sound of pounding feet, snapping branches, and the deep, resonant roar of a predator announcing its presence. That roar, whether it was the low-frequency bellow scientists suspect or something deeper still, would have carried for kilometers. It would not simply have been heard, it would have been felt, resonating through the air and the ground alike, a primal warning and a declaration of power. For prey, it was a sound to flee from. For rivals, a signal to keep their distance. Though we call it the tyrant lizard king, T-Rex was no isolated monarch. It shared its world with an array of formidable creatures. Among them, Triceratops, massive, horned and shielded with a great bony frill, was perhaps its most iconic opponent. The battles between these two giants have been immortalized in fossil evidence. Bite marks on Triceratops' frills, healed scars on T-Rex jaws. These were confrontations of strength and endurance, the kind of clashes that would have been talked about for generations, if only there had been anyone to tell the tales. Yet life in this world was not constant conflict. There were moments of calm, a T-Rex resting in the shade of a tree, its massive tail stretched out behind it, yellow eyes half-lidded as insects buzz in lazy circles above. In these times, the great predator was simply another part of the land's rhythm, its presence felt but not acted upon. It is important to remember that this world was both alien and familiar. The sun rose and set as it does today. Rivers carved their paths through the earth, winds carried the scent of flowers, and rain fell in silver sheets. But every sound was sharper, every shadow deeper. Life here was lived on a knife edge, and in the center of it all stood the Tyrannosaurus Rex, not just surviving but ruling. As we take our first steps alongside this giant, we begin to understand the world that made it what it was. The T-Rex was not simply the product of strength or size, but of an environment that demanded perfection from its predators. Every muscle, every tooth, every step it took was shaped by the land, the climate, and the creatures that surrounded it. And so, with the ground still trembling faintly beneath our feet, we leave this first glimpse of the Cretaceous behind, ready to look closer. For to know the king, we must begin at the beginning, at the fragile, uncertain moment when it first opened its eyes to this wild and wondrous world. In the stillness of dawn, deep in a sheltered hollow hidden by thick ferns, a clutch of eggs rests in the soft embrace of rotting vegetation. The air here is warm and humid, the scent of damp earth mingling with the faint sweetness of decaying leaves. Above, the canopy sways gently in the morning breeze, letting down slivers of golden light that dance across the nest. This is the birthplace of a future king, though for now it is nothing more than a small, fragile vessel no bigger than a watermelon, its mottled shell blending into the shadows. Life for a Tyrannosaurus Rex begins with vulnerability. The egg, despite its thick, calcified shell, is a fragile fortress against the many dangers that stalk the Cretaceous world. Small mammals, nimble reptiles, and even other dinosaurs would happily devour the rich yolk inside, if given the chance. That is why the nest is never truly unattended. Somewhere nearby, one or both parents linger, their massive forms partially concealed by trees. Their keen eyes and sharp senses remain alert for any movement in the undergrowth. The eggs themselves are marvels of natural engineering. The shell is porous enough to allow for the exchange of gases, oxygen entering, carbon dioxide leaving, yet strong enough to withstand the occasional shift of a parent's foot or the weight of surrounding vegetation. Inside, the developing embryo floats in amniotic fluid, slowly taking shape over the course of months. At first, it is nothing more than a cluster of cells, but soon tiny limbs begin to bud, eyes form, and the beginnings of a snout take shape. Day by day, it grows more recognizably dinosaurian. We know something of what this process was like, thanks to fossilized embryos and eggs from other theropod species. While no fully preserved T-Rex embryo has been found, related species give us valuable clues. The developing tyrannosaur likely had proportionally larger eyes at this stage, preparing it for the sharp vision it would need to survive. Its limbs, while not yet the massive muscle-bound structures of adulthood, were already functional, ready to kick and wriggle when the time came to break free. That moment, hatching, is a perilous one. The chick inside must muster the strength to chip away at the shell with a specialized tooth called an egg tooth, which will fall away after its purpose is served. The effort is exhausting, and for many, the world they emerge into will be their final sight. Predators are drawn to the sounds of hatching just as they are to the scent of blood. Timing is everything. Often multiple eggs hatch within hours of one another, overwhelming potential predators with sheer numbers and improving the odds that at least some will survive. When a young T-Rex finally pushes free of its shell, it is a far cry from the towering giant it will become, standing no taller than a human knee and weighing perhaps 6 to 7 kilograms. It is covered in a fine coat of downy proto-feathers, a soft insulation to keep its small body warm in the cool mornings and damp nights. Its legs are long and slender, built more for speed and agility than for the crushing power of adulthood. The skull is narrow, the jaw still growing into its full arsenal of teeth. In these early days, speed and caution are the hatchling's best defenses, even under the watchful eye of a parent. The dangers are many: prowling raptors with sickle-shaped claws, slinking crocodilians in nearby water, and the ever-present risk of starvation if food becomes scarce. Fossil evidence suggests that young tyrannosaurs may have had a very different ecological role than their elders. With their lighter frames and quicker stride, they could chase smaller prey, mammals, lizards, even juvenile dinosaurs, filling a niche more akin to that of a cheetah or wolf rather than a lion. Parental care in T-Rex is still a matter of scientific debate, but many paleontologists believe these massive predators may have guarded their nests and young for at least a short period after hatching. The reasoning comes from comparisons to modern birds, particularly large, ground-nesting species like ostriches, which share a distant ancestry with dinosaurs. The sight of a parent standing sentinel, a towering shadow among the trees, while young scurry about in search of insects or scraps, is a scene that feels both ancient and strangely familiar. But such protection cannot last forever. Within weeks or months, the young are expected to fend for themselves, their instincts driving them to hunt, to learn, and to survive in a world that shows no mercy. It is here that the long apprenticeship of life begins. Every hunt, every narrow escape from danger, is a lesson. A failed chase teaches patience and strategy. An encounter with a larger predator teaches the value of distance and silence. Growth for a T-Rex is nothing short of explosive. Studies of fossilized bones show distinct growth rings, much like those in trees, revealing how quickly these animals matured. From a mere handful of kilograms at hatching, a juvenile could reach hundreds of kilograms within just a few years. By the age of around 14, it would be approaching full size, standing nearly 4 meters at the hip and stretching more than 12 meters from snout to tail. This rapid growth required enormous amounts of food, making young tyrannosaurs some of the hungriest and most active predators in their ecosystems. In the in-between years, too large to hide easily but not yet strong enough to dominate, a young T-Rex lives in a delicate balance. It must hunt prey that is big enough to sustain its energy needs, but avoid the notice of fully grown adults, which might see it as competition or even a potential meal. Evidence of healed bite marks on juvenile tyrannosaur fossils suggests that conflict between individuals was not uncommon. Whether these were territorial disputes, dominance displays, or simply the harsh lessons of survival, they left lasting scars on both body and mind. Through it all, the young tyrannosaur's senses sharpen, its eyesight becomes more acute, able to detect movement at great distances. Its sense of smell, already strong, becomes a vital tool for tracking prey or recognizing danger on the wind. Its growing body builds muscle and coordination, turning awkward youthful sprints into the powerful, purposeful strides that will one day carry it to the top of the food chain. And then, slowly but surely, the proportions begin to change. The once slender legs grow thicker with muscle. The skull widens, accommodating ever larger jaw muscles. The teeth, once narrow and suited for gripping, are replaced by thick, serrated weapons built for crushing bone. The long, light frame of youth gives way to the deep-chested, heavy-tailed bulk of an apex predator. The journey from egg to king is a story of transformation, of vulnerability becoming power, of caution evolving into dominance. But even in adulthood, the lessons learned in youth remain. Every successful hunt, every escape from danger, every moment of stillness beneath the Cretaceous sun carries the memory of those first days, when survival was uncertain and every shadow might conceal a threat. Now, with the young tyrannosaur grown into a formidable hunter, it is time to examine the most iconic feature of its fearsome anatomy, the head that would make it a legend. It is one thing to imagine the size and power of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It is another entirely to stand in the shadow of its head alone, nearly 1.5 meters from the tip of the snout to the back of the skull. This vast structure is less a head in the way we think of it, and more a living fortress. Every ridge, cavity, and contour serving a purpose honed over millions of years. The skull of T-Rex is both a weapon and a sensory command center. When viewed from the side, it is unmistakably deep and robust, shaped to bear the stresses of a life spent subduing and dismembering prey that could weigh several tons. The upper jaw curves slightly downward at the front, giving the snout a predatory, almost hawk-like profile. The orbits, the openings where the eyes sit, face partially forward, granting binocular vision, a rare advantage among predators of its size. The jaws themselves are framed with teeth that have become the stuff of legend, thick, conical, and serrated along the edges like steak knives forged in bone. The largest could exceed 30 centimeters in length from root to tip, including the portion embedded in the jawbone. These were not the delicate blades of some carnivores, designed for slicing. They were built for crushing. Fossilized prey bones bearing deep punctures, not cuts, tell the story plainly. A single bite from a T-Rex could pierce solid bone and extract the nutrient-rich marrow within. How powerful was that bite? Studies of muscle attachment points, jaw mechanics, and computer simulations have given us remarkable estimates. It is believed that a fully grown Tyrannosaurus Rex could exert a bite force exceeding 8,000 pounds, more than double that of the most powerful modern crocodile. This was a predator capable of turning the bones of a triceratops into splinters in moments. But raw power alone is only part of the story. The skull was a masterpiece of balance between strength and weight. Its bones were not solid slabs. They were riddled with air spaces, making the head lighter without sacrificing stability. This internal scaffolding acted like the trusses in a bridge, reducing weight while maintaining the ability to withstand tremendous forces. These spaces also likely played a role in thermoregulation, helping to manage the heat generated during strenuous activity. Then there are the senses. The forward-facing eyes of T-Rex provided depth perception, essential for judging the distance to prey during a chase or ambush. Its visual field, reconstructed from fossil evidence, suggests it could see in 3 dimensions almost as well as modern birds of prey. The eye sockets were large, accommodating eyes the size of grapefruits, which would have captured every flicker of movement in the open plains and forest edges of the Cretaceous. Above and ahead of the eyes, the nasal openings hint at another extraordinary adaptation, a sense of smell unrivaled among dinosaurs. The olfactory bulbs, the brain structures responsible for detecting scent, were enormous relative to the size of the brain. This suggests that T-Rex could track prey over vast distances, follow the scent of a carcass long after it had been abandoned, and perhaps even detect subtle chemical signals left by other members of its species. The ears, too, tell their own story. While the external shape of the ear is lost to time, the inner ear bones fossilized within the skull reveal that T-Rex was likely sensitive to low-frequency sounds. This ability would have allowed it to detect the footfalls of large animals kilometers away, or to communicate with others of its kind in rumbling calls that rolled like distant thunder. One of the most striking features of the skull is its asymmetry. The left and right halves are not mirror images. Subtle differences in bone shape and muscle attachment points may have enhanced the animal's ability to apply twisting forces when biting. This would have been useful for tearing flesh from bone or wrenching apart the armor of an ankylosaur. The jaw joint itself was built for both crushing and a degree of flexibility. Some scientists believe that, like snakes and certain birds, T-Rex may have had a kinetic skull, one where certain bones could move slightly relative to one another. This would have allowed it to adjust its bite, apply force at different angles, or deal with struggling prey more effectively. And yet, despite all this lethal design, the skull was not only a tool for destruction, it was also a key part of social behavior. Faint ridges and ornamentations along the snout and above the eyes may have been used in display to intimidate rivals, attract mates, or signal dominance within a group. Some paleontologists suggest that these ridges could have been brightly colored in life, though whether T-Rex could perceive its own colors as vividly as we imagine remains unknown. Looking closely, we see that the skull's anatomy was the product of countless evolutionary refinements. Each adaptation, the interlocking teeth, the air-filled chambers, the reinforced jaw muscles, was not simply added all at once, but inherited, altered, and perfected through generations of tyrannosaur ancestors. By the time T-Rex appeared in its final form around 68 million years ago, its skull had become the pinnacle of predatory engineering in the dinosaur world. To picture this head in action is to imagine an unstoppable combination of precision and brutality. A stalking approach through the long grass, the target unaware, a sudden surge forward, the ground trembling with each stride, then in a flash the jaws snap shut, the serrated teeth driving deep, bone cracking under the immense pressure. In that instant, the skull's every feature, from its binocular vision to its crushing bite, works in perfect unison, the culmination of millions of years of survival-driven design. But to truly understand T-Rex as a living creature, we must go beyond its fearsome anatomy. For a predator, the ability to sense the world is just as vital as the ability to overpower it. And so, as we leave the shadow of the skull behind, we turn to the finely tuned instruments that made the Tyrannosaurus Rex one of the most perceptive hunters ever to walk the earth. Imagine standing perfectly still in the dappled half-light of the late Cretaceous forest, the air warm and heavy with the scent of wet vegetation. There is no movement you can see, no sound you can hear, and yet, somewhere beyond the trees, a Tyrannosaurus Rex has already found you, not by sight alone, not by the faint snap of a twig beneath your foot, but by a combination of senses so finely tuned that the mere act of existing within its territory could be enough to betray your presence. The T-Rex was not just an animal of brute force. It was in many ways a living sensor array, an apex predator honed not just in muscle and bone but in perception. Each sense fed information into a brain primed for decision-making, in fractions of a second, whether to stalk, strike, or pass by unseen. Sight was one of its most formidable tools. Unlike many large predators of its time, which relied heavily on scent or surprise, T-Rex had forward-facing eyes that provided binocular vision. This allowed for a degree of depth perception rare among animals of its size. In practical terms, it meant that when a Tyrannosaurus gauged the distance to a moving prey animal, whether it was a lumbering Edmontosaurus or the horned bulk of a Triceratops, it could make highly accurate judgments about when and where to strike. Fossil reconstructions suggest that its visual field was as wide or wider than that of modern hawks and eagles, giving it a nearly panoramic awareness while still maintaining overlap for depth. With eyes larger than a human fist and retinal structures likely packed with light-sensitive cells, it may have been capable of seeing with exceptional clarity even in low light. The Cretaceous dawn and dusk, times when many animals were most active, would have been no barrier to the king's hunt. Then there was smell, a sense so powerful it almost defies modern comparison. The olfactory bulbs of T-Rex were enormous, proportionally rivaling or surpassing those of modern vultures, which are capable of detecting the scent of carrion from kilometers away. This adaptation would have made T-Rex a master at finding both live prey and carcasses, allowing it to follow the faintest chemical trail left on the wind. A hadrosaur wounded miles away might still find no safety if the scent of its blood drifted into the nostrils of a hunting tyrant. This heightened sense of smell would also have had uses beyond hunting. It could detect other members of its own species from afar, whether to avoid dangerous rivals or to seek out potential mates. It may have read the world in scent the way humans read words on a page, each shift in the wind carrying a new piece of information about its surroundings. Hearing was another sense where T-Rex excelled. The internal structure of its ear, preserved in fossilized bone, reveals a sensitivity to low-frequency sounds, the kind of deep vibrations that travel through both air and ground over long distances. This would have allowed it to detect the distant footfalls of a large animal, the low bellow of a calling mate, or even the subtle vibrations of herds moving beyond the line of sight. It is possible that T-Rex communicated in these deep registers itself, using infrasonic calls much like modern elephants or crocodiles. These sounds could pass through the forest with little distortion, reaching the ears of others far away without drawing attention from smaller animals that could not detect them. To hear such a call in the Cretaceous night might have been to feel it more than to hear it, a rolling pulse through the ribs, a warning or a summons in equal measure. While we cannot know for certain, there is growing evidence that T-Rex may also have possessed a form of touch sensitivity beyond the ordinary. Fine nerve endings around the snout could have allowed it to investigate objects or carcasses with precision, much as crocodilians do today. This would have been useful not only for feeding, but also for social interactions, courtship rituals, or tending to eggs and young. Some scientists have even speculated about taste as part of its sensory arsenal. Although it is unlikely that T-Rex had the nuanced palate of a human, taste receptors would have helped it detect spoilage in meat, identify prey species, and perhaps even distinguish the chemical signals left behind by other predators. All of these senses were coordinated by a brain that, while not especially large for its body size, was highly specialized. The regions responsible for vision and scent were particularly well developed, suggesting that the animal's behavior was strongly guided by what it saw and smelled. This combination would have made it an expert both in active hunting and opportunistic scavenging, able to follow a scent trail over long distances, then close in with acute vision for the final attack. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of T-Rex's sensory world is how these abilities work together. Imagine a scene: a faint vibration through the ground catches its attention. The smell of herd animals reaches it on the breeze. It turns its head slightly, the forward-facing eyes locking on a flicker of movement between the trees. In that instant, it has a complete picture of the situation, where its prey is, how far away, and what direction it is moving. The decision to pursue is made almost before the prey itself realizes it is in danger. In this way, T-Rex was less a blunt instrument of nature and more a precision-guided one. Its senses did not just inform its actions, they defined them. It could be patient, waiting in the shadows for the perfect moment to strike. It could be relentless, following a scent for hours or even days, and when the time came it could be explosively decisive, closing the gap in a rush of muscle and momentum. For millions of years, these abilities ensured that the king of the tyrant lizards remained unchallenged in its domain. No other predator of its size matched its combination of raw power and refined perception. To be in the sights or the scent of a T-Rex was to be living on borrowed time. And yet, as formidable as these senses were, they were nothing without the body to act upon them. To fully understand the supremacy of this predator, we must step back and take in the machine it powered, the towering muscular frame built not just for killing, but for enduring the demands of life at the top of the food chain. Picture the silhouette of a Tyrannosaurus Rex against the fading light of a Cretaceous sunset. The sky glows in streaks of orange and deep crimson, casting the great predator in shadow. The sheer bulk of its form is unmistakable, a body that could stretch more than 12 meters from nose to tail, with hips rising nearly 4 meters above the ground. Every curve of muscle, every line of bone is the product of millions of years of refinement, built for one purpose: to dominate its world. The body of T-Rex was an exquisite balance of power and proportion, from its massive skull at the front to the counterbalancing sweep of its muscular tail at the rear. It was a machine optimized for both precision and force. Its center of gravity sat just ahead of the hips, giving it an almost bird-like posture, with the head and torso held forward and the tail stretched straight behind for balance. Its legs were nothing short of monumental. Each was a pillar of bone sheathed in thick cords of muscle, built to support and propel a creature weighing between 6 and 9 tons. The thigh bones, femurs as thick as fence posts, anchored some of the largest muscles in the animal kingdom. Beneath them, the shin bones and ankle joints were reinforced for the repeated stresses of running and turning at high speed. And though its feet bore only 3 forward-pointing toes tipped with curved claws, each step carried enough force to leave deep impressions in the soft ground, some of which we can still see preserved today in fossilized trackways. Despite its enormous size, the T-Rex was no lumbering brute. Studies of muscle reconstruction and biomechanics suggest it could reach speeds of 20 to 25 kilometers per hour, perhaps even more over short bursts. That might not seem fast compared to modern predators, but for an animal of its mass, it was astonishing. More importantly, that speed was coupled with agility. Its strong hips and balancing tail allowed it to pivot sharply, a critical skill for keeping pace with prey that could turn and dodge. The tail itself was a marvel. Far from being a passive appendage, it was a living counterweight composed of nearly 40 vertebrae, wrapped in layers of muscle and sinew. When the T-Rex ran, the tail swung subtly with each stride, absorbing momentum and keeping the animal stable. Without it, the forward heavy body would have pitched downward. In essence, the tail was as much a part of the animal's locomotion as its legs, a dynamic stabilizer for a predator built to move. Moving up the body, the torso was barrel-shaped and powerful, housing massive lungs and a strong heart capable of delivering oxygen-rich blood to those hard-working muscles. While we cannot know its exact physiology, many scientists believe that, like modern birds, T-Rex may have had a highly efficient respiratory system with air sacs extending into its bones. This would have allowed it to sustain bursts of speed without overheating and to recover quickly from exertion. Then there were the arms, famously small, almost comically so in comparison to the rest of its body. Barely over a meter in length, they have been the subject of endless speculation, but despite their size, these limbs were far from useless. Each was powerfully muscled and ended in 2 sharp claws, capable of exerting significant force. They may have been used to grip prey during feeding, help the animal rise from a resting position, or hold onto mates during courtship. Their reduced size was likely an evolutionary trade-off, freeing up more mass and muscle for the head and neck, the primary weapons of the T-Rex. Speaking of the neck, it was thick and muscular, designed to drive the skull forward with devastating force. Imagine the mechanics of a hunting strike. The legs surge forward, the tail stabilizes, and the neck snaps the head into position. The bite lands with such precision that in a single motion the predator can crush through muscle, bone, and sinew. Strength, however, is only one part of the equation. Stamina may have been the true secret to T-Rex's success. While it could deliver explosive bursts of speed, it likely excelled at maintaining a steady pursuit over distance. This endurance would have allowed it to shadow herds for hours, waiting for an opportunity, an injured adult, a slower juvenile, or a momentary lapse in vigilance. And when the time came, it could close the gap with terrifying swiftness. The animal's weight and structure also suggest it could withstand immense punishment. Fossilized bones often show signs of healed injuries, broken ribs, damaged vertebrae, and deep bite marks that had mended over time. This resilience points to a predator that could recover from battles with prey or rivals and return to hunting within weeks. Its sheer presence on the landscape was enough to alter the behavior of other animals. Herds might migrate differently in areas where a T-Rex was active, keeping to more open ground to spot it sooner. Smaller predators would follow in its wake, scavenging scraps from its kills. Even the great horned and armored herbivores that could, on occasion, fend it off would have treated it with caution. To see a T-Rex in motion would have been to witness the perfect marriage of mass and momentum. Each step was deliberate yet powerful, the muscles along its thighs and tail working in a rhythm that seemed almost mechanical in its precision. The ground would have quivered under its weight, and its shadow would have stretched long across the plain, a moving warning to all within sight. But this formidable frame needed constant fuel. A predator of such size had an enormous appetite, and its body demanded a steady supply of protein and fat to maintain peak performance. This leads us naturally to its diet, not just what it ate, but how it fed, how it killed, and how it could strip a carcass clean with efficiency unmatched by any other predator of its age. The late Cretaceous world was not one of abundance for all. For every lush stretch of greenery, and for every river teeming with fish, there were dry seasons, shortages, and moments when even the greatest predators had to work for every meal. For a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a creature weighing as much as a small bus and burning through thousands of calories a day, the T-Rex diet was as vast and varied as its range, but its primary fare was large herbivorous dinosaurs. Among the most common were Triceratops with their armored frills and stabbing horns, Edmontosaurus, the broad-muzzled duckbills that moved in great herds, and the tank-like Ankylosaurus covered in heavy armor and armed with a massive tail club. Each prey type required a different approach, and each carried risks that even the king could not ignore. When stalking hadrosaurs, speed and surprise could win the day. The predator might shadow a herd for hours, remaining just far enough away to be ignored but close enough to strike if one animal lagged behind. Then, in a sudden burst, the T-Rex would explode from the cover of trees or arise in the land, driving its massive legs forward in great pounding strides. The chosen hadrosaur would flee, but the king's reach and stamina could close the gap in moments. A single bone-crushing bite to the spine or pelvis was often enough to bring the prey crashing down. With Triceratops, the hunt was more dangerous. These horned giants could weigh several tons themselves, and their three-pronged arsenal was no empty display. Fossilized Triceratops skulls have been found with puncture marks, matching the teeth of T-Rex, but T-Rex fossils have also been found bearing deep gouges that match the horn tips of a ceratopsian. A frontal assault was risky, perhaps suicidal, but a clever tyrant could circle to the side or rear, avoiding the horns to land a crippling bite to the leg or flank. The Ankylosaurus posed yet another challenge. Heavily armored and low to the ground, it could deliver devastating blows with its tail club. For such prey, a T-Rex might have relied on ambush, waiting until the animal's attention was elsewhere before striking. Even then, the heavy armor required immense bite force to breach. It was a battle of precision and persistence. Not all meals came from the living. Evidence from bone chemistry and feeding marks suggests that T-Rex was also an opportunistic scavenger. A carcass, whether from disease, injury, or another predator's kill, was too valuable to ignore. Here, its extraordinary sense of smell would have been an asset, detecting the faint scent of decay from kilometers away. Once found, the T-Rex's bone-splintering jaws allowed it to devour nearly every part of the corpse, extracting marrow and nutrients that lesser scavengers could not reach. The act of feeding was not delicate. Picture the scene. The T-Rex lowers its massive head to the carcass, teeth sinking into flesh with a sound like tearing canvas. The muscles in its neck and torso contract in powerful waves, wrenching free great chunks of meat. Bones crack under the pressure, fragments swallowed along with the meat. The stomach acid strong enough to dissolve even the densest material. This efficiency meant little was wasted, a necessary adaptation for a predator whose meals might be days apart. Fossilized bite marks on bones, some belonging to other tyrannosaurs, suggest that cannibalism may have occurred, whether this was the result of fights over territory, desperate hunger, or simply scavenging the dead. It reveals a predator with few boundaries when it came to feeding. In a land where survival was never guaranteed, the difference between life and death could be measured in the willingness to eat whatever was available. The size of a meal could vary enormously. A single large kill might sustain a T-Rex for several days, the predator feeding until sated, resting nearby, then returning to feed again. But smaller meals were also part of its repertoire. Juvenile dinosaurs, small mammals, or even large fish in shallow waters. While its body was built for bringing down giants, the king was not above a quick, low-risk snack. Its teeth, often described as bananas with serrations, were ideally suited for this mixed diet. Unlike the slicing blades of some theropods, T-Rex teeth could withstand repeated impacts with bone. They were continually replaced throughout its life, ensuring the predator never faced the hunt with a dull or damaged set. This was critical for a feeding style that involved immense force and frequent contact with armor and skeleton. The hunting and feeding behavior of T-Rex also influenced the ecosystem around it. The remains of its kills fed smaller predators and scavengers, raptors, mammals, and even insects. In this way, each kill was not just a personal victory but a redistribution of resources across the food web. Where the king fed, life in many forms followed. And yet, for all its fearsome adaptations, hunting was never without risk. A mistimed strike could lead to injury. A stubborn prey animal could fight back, inflicting wounds that might heal or might fester. In such cases, scavenging became not a lesser skill but a vital fallback, one that ensured survival until the next opportunity arose. The T-Rex was a predator without equal in its time, but its power lay not in relentless killing alone. Its strength was in adaptability, in its willingness to hunt or scavenge, to take down giants or seize what fortune placed before it. This flexibility meant it could thrive in a range of habitats and through changing seasons, remaining at the top of the food chain until the very end of the age of dinosaurs. And yet, one question continues to spark debate even today. Was the Tyrannosaurus Rex primarily a hunter, or was it more often a scavenger? The evidence points both ways, and the truth may lie in a balance between the two. A balance we will explore next, as we step into the heart of one of paleontology's most enduring arguments. In the quiet halls of museums and the bustling rooms of research labs, a single question about Tyrannosaurus Rex has stirred more discussion than perhaps any other. Was this enormous predator the active hunter of popular imagination, or was it, in truth, more of a scavenger, relying on the kills of others? It is an argument that reaches beyond paleontology into the very heart of how we define a predator. For decades, the image of T-Rex has been shaped by media, art, and the public's fascination. A towering monster charging at its prey, jaws open in a terrible roar. But in the mid-20th century, some scientists began to challenge this view. The animal's massive size, small forelimbs, and potentially limited running speed led them to propose that perhaps the king was not a swift killer at all, but rather a patient opportunist, using its keen senses to locate carcasses from miles away. The scavenger hypothesis found its champion in paleontologist Jack Horner, who pointed to several anatomical features as evidence. The relatively small arms, he argued, would have been ill-suited for grasping struggling prey. The massive head and bone-crushing teeth, on the other hand, were ideal for tearing apart already dead animals, cracking through armor and skeleton to reach the rich marrow inside. Horner also suggested that the sheer mass of a T-Rex would make sustained high-speed chases inefficient, leaving scavenging as a more reliable feeding strategy. Supporters of this view also noted that T-Rex's sense of smell was extraordinarily developed. The enlarged olfactory bulbs suggest an ability to detect carrion from extraordinary distances, a skill common in today's top scavengers like vultures. In a vast, open Cretaceous landscape, such an adaptation would allow a tyrannosaur to wander efficiently from one meal to the next, without the risks of a dangerous hunt. But the counter-argument is equally compelling and supported by growing evidence. Fossilized bones of herbivorous dinosaurs, including Triceratops and Edmontosaurus, have been found with healed bite marks that match the size and shape of T-Rex teeth. These healed wounds mean the animals were bitten while alive and survived the attack, at least for a time. This is strong evidence that T-Rex engaged in active hunting, not simply feeding on the dead. Biomechanical studies have also painted a different picture of the predator's capabilities. Analyses of its leg structure and muscle mass suggest that, while it may not have been the fastest animal in its ecosystem, it was more than capable of short, explosive bursts of speed, enough to overtake slower-moving prey or to close the gap during an ambush. Its forward-facing eyes and acute depth perception were likewise more in line with an active predator than with a pure scavenger. Another key point is behavior. In modern ecosystems, the distinction between hunter and scavenger is rarely absolute. Lions will happily steal kills from hyenas. Hyenas will actively hunt when the opportunity arises. Wolves scavenge when food is scarce. In every case, the most successful carnivores are those that adapt their feeding strategies to the situation. T-Rex, with its combination of powerful senses, immense strength and opportunistic nature, may have been no different. Imagine, for a moment, a day in the life of the king. The morning begins with the faint scent of death on the wind. A carcass, perhaps a hadrosaur brought down by another predator or fallen to disease. The T-Rex follows the trail, eventually finding the body and feeding until its hunger is sated. But later that same day, while moving through a wooded riverbank, it spots a lone juvenile Triceratops grazing. In the open, the young animal would have a chance, but here among the trees, its movements are slightly hindered. The T-Rex lowers its head, locks its gaze, and advances with silent, deliberate steps until the final rush. In this moment, it is every inch the active hunter. It is possible, even likely, that this balance between hunting and scavenging shifted with the seasons. During the lush wet season, when prey was plentiful, hunting may have been the dominant behavior. During harsher, drier times, the predator's reliance on scavenging would have increased. Such flexibility would have been a tremendous advantage, ensuring survival in a changing and sometimes unforgiving environment. The very anatomy of T-Rex supports this dual approach. Its massive jaws could handle fresh, struggling prey just as easily as they could crack through the sun-dried bones of a long-dead carcass. Its sense of smell was an early warning system for opportunity, while its vision and hearing gave it the tools for precision when a chase was required. In both roles, hunter and scavenger, it was supremely equipped. This debate, though often framed as an either-or question, may ultimately reveal more about human expectations than about the animal itself. We like our predators to be clearly defined, the noble hunter or the sinister scavenger, but nature rarely adheres to such simple categories. T-Rex's success likely lay in its refusal to specialize too narrowly. In a world where survival meant taking advantage of every opportunity, versatility was the true crown. And so the argument remains, but perhaps not as a contradiction. Instead, it is a reminder that the king of the tyrant lizards ruled not just through strength or speed, but through adaptability. the ability to seize a meal whether it was earned in the chase or claimed from the remains of another's kill. Beyond the question of how it fed lies another, equally fascinating part of the story. The community in which T-Rex lived. It was not alone in its world. All around it, other giants, horned, armored, swift and sly, shaped the challenges it faced and the strategies it used. To understand the king, we must meet its neighbors, rivals and prey, and see the Cretaceous world as a whole living system. The world of Tyrannosaurus Rex was not an empty stage upon which the king strode alone. It was an ecosystem brimming with life, vast herds, solitary wanderers, opportunistic predators, and stealthy scavengers. Each species carried its own adaptations, its own strategies for survival, and each played a role in shaping the behavior of the others. To understand the life of T-Rex, we must see it not as a solitary force, but as part of a living, breathing network of Cretaceous giants and underdogs alike. The most iconic of its neighbors, and perhaps its greatest rival in sheer drama, was Triceratops horridus. Standing nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulders and stretching up to 9 meters in length, this horned herbivore was a walking fortress. Its broad, bony frill shielded its neck, while its 3 horns, 2 long, forward-curving ones above the eyes and a shorter spike on the snout, could turn a charging predator into a wounded retreat. Triceratops lived in herds, offering further protection through sheer numbers. Yet fossil evidence in the form of tooth marks on frills and healed wounds on T-Rex jaws tells us that these two titans clashed often. In the open plains, a determined T-Rex might try to separate a slower or weaker member from the herd, circling to avoid the deadly horns before delivering a fatal bite to the spine or hip. Sharing the same landscapes were the hadrosaurs, such as Edmontosaurus. These duck-billed plant-eaters traveled in large, restless herds, their lives dictated by the seasonal search for fresh grazing. They were not armored, but their safety lay in numbers and vigilance. Their sharp eyes and ears could detect danger at a distance, and at the first sign of a predator, the entire herd could erupt into a thundering stampede. For a T-Rex, this presented both a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge in catching an individual without being injured in the chaos, and an opportunity when panic split the herd and left a weaker member exposed. In the more forested regions, the heavily armored Ankylosaurus presented yet another obstacle. At over 6 meters long, this low-slung herbivore was sheathed in bony plates and knobs, its tail ending in a massive solid club. To attack an Ankylosaurus was to invite the risk of a shattering blow that could break bones or crush muscle. Fossilized remains of these animals showed damage consistent with such impacts, proof that even the king could be humbled by a well-placed strike. It is likely that T-Rex approached these tank-like herbivores with caution, seeking an advantage through ambush rather than a head-on confrontation. Yet not all of T-Rex's interactions with its neighbors were predatory. Some species were competitors, other carnivores that hunted the same prey or scavenged from the same carcasses. While the adult T-Rex had little to fear from most rivals due to its size and strength, younger individuals may have faced competition from smaller theropods, including the nimble dromaeosaurids, relatives of Velociraptor. These smaller predators hunted in packs, using speed and agility to bring down prey far too quick for a lumbering tyrannosaur. In return, they would have avoided the larger predator, knowing that even a single bite from the king could be fatal. Another possible rival, though far less common, was Dacotaraptor, a massive dromaeosaurid over 5 meters long. While no direct fossil evidence of interaction between Dacotaraptor and T-Rex has yet been discovered, their overlapping ranges suggest that encounters could have happened, likely ending with the smaller predator retreating in favor of self-preservation. Even in the skies, T-Rex shared its domain with watchful eyes. Large pterosaurs soared overhead, scanning the ground for carrion or small prey. They were not competitors in the traditional sense, but their presence could alert herbivores to danger or draw a tyrannosaur's attention to a fresh kill. In this way, they were both rival and inadvertent ally depending on the day. The rivers and swamps were home to another kind of threat. Enormous crocodile forms. These semi-aquatic predators could lurk unseen in muddy waters, ambushing dinosaurs that came to drink. A T-Rex, with its immense size and caution, would have been far less vulnerable than smaller species. But even the king would not ignore the dangers of a shadowed waterline. Smaller creatures also played their part in the landscape. Early mammals, scurrying through the undergrowth, posed no threat to the tyrant lizard king, but they were sharp-eyed scavengers, quick to take advantage of scraps left behind. Flocks of small feathered dinosaurs flitted through the trees, adding to the constant background of movement and sound. These smaller animals formed the living fabric of the ecosystem, prey for some, indicators of danger for others. What emerges from this picture is not a kingdom ruled by a solitary monarch, but a community of interlocking relationships. The presence of T-Rex influenced the behavior of everything around it. Herd animals developed tighter group structures and defensive behaviors in response to its hunting. Other predators adapted to avoid direct confrontation, focusing on speed, stealth, or niche diets. Even the scavengers benefited from the leftovers of its kills, creating a ripple effect that shaped the very rhythm of the Cretaceous plains. In turn, the king was shaped by these relationships. The size of a triceratops horn might dictate the angle of an attack. The stampede patterns of hadrosaurs could influence hunting strategy. The sheer defensive resilience of Ankylosaurus might push a predator toward easier, if less rewarding, targets. Every species, great and small, was part of the ongoing arms race of adaptation, where one change in a prey animal could lead to a change in the predator, and vice versa. This interconnectedness is what made the late Cretaceous such a vibrant, dynamic world. It was not a place where one species existed in isolation, but where every action reverberated across the ecosystem. And for Tyrannosaurus Rex, survival meant more than strength. It meant understanding this living network and playing its role to perfection. But survival was not just about feeding and fighting. For a species to endure, it must also reproduce. In the next stage of our journey, we will step into the quieter, more mysterious realm of courtship and mating, the rituals and instincts that brought new life into the world of the tyrant lizard king. In the minds of many, Tyrannosaurus Rex is forever imagined in the heat of a hunt, jaws open, eyes locked on fleeing prey, the embodiment of lethal power. But survival is more than hunting. It is also the passing on of life, the ancient rhythm of courtship, pairing, and the creation of the next generation. In the late Cretaceous, even the king of the tyrant lizards had moments when dominance was expressed not through the kill but through the dance of attraction. The season for courtship would likely have been dictated by climate and the cycles of the land. Perhaps as the wet season drew to a close and food was plentiful, the urge to seek a mate would have stirred. The air would grow thick with scent signals. Invisible trails carried on warm breezes as individuals sought out potential partners. These chemical cues, detected by that extraordinary sense of smell, might have been the first announcement of intent, a way of saying, "I am here, I am strong, I am ready." Visual displays may also have played a role. The skull of T-Rex, with its ridges and subtle ornamentations, may have been more than just functional architecture. In life, they could have been highlighted with patches of color, perhaps in deep reds, oranges, or yellows, pigments designed to stand out in the green-brown world of the Cretaceous plains. If these colors were paired with a powerful, confident stride or a deliberate tilt of the head, they could have signaled health, vitality, and genetic fitness to a prospective mate. Sound would have carried the message farther still. A deep, resonant call, not a high roar as popular culture often portrays, but a low-frequency rumble that could roll for kilometers, may have served as both an invitation and a declaration of territory. Such calls might have vibrated through the chest as much as they were heard through the ears, reaching the senses of another T-Rex long before the animal itself came into view. When two potential mates finally met, the encounter was likely a careful negotiation. At this scale, courtship carried risks. A misinterpreted movement could lead to aggression, and aggression in such animals could be fatal. It is possible that individuals circled one another at a distance. At first, heads held high, tails steady for balance, eyes fixed in unblinking appraisal. There may have been a mirroring of movements, a cautious testing of intent. Some paleontologists have suggested that tactile interaction, gentle touches of the snout, nudges along the flank, could have been part of this ritual. Modern crocodilians, which share a distant ancestry with dinosaurs, engage in such behavior, as do many birds. In the case of T-Rex, these gestures would have been deliberate and slow, given the sheer power behind each movement. A nudge from a creature weighing several tons would not be taken lightly. If the interaction went well, the pair might have remained together for a period of time, long enough to mate and perhaps even to guard a nesting site. We cannot know for certain if Tyrannosaurus Rex formed lasting bonds, but fossil evidence from other theropods suggests that at least temporary pair bonds were possible. The advantage of such cooperation would have been significant. Two massive predators could better defend eggs and hatchlings from opportunistic attackers, increasing the odds of survival for their young. The nesting itself would have been a critical stage. A female T-Rex after mating might have sought out a sheltered location, perhaps a rise of ground near a water source, protected on one side by dense vegetation. She would dig a shallow nest, lining it with leaves and plant matter to help insulate the eggs. These nests could have contained anywhere from a handful to over a dozen eggs, each encased in a thick, mottled shell. During this time, both parents, if the male remained, would have been especially vigilant. Even the most formidable predator has vulnerable moments, and a nesting site would have been a tempting prize for smaller predators or even rival tyrannosaurs. The sight of an adult T-Rex standing guard over such a site would have been a warning to all approach, and you risk a violent end. Feeding during the nesting period might have been done in shifts, one parent hunting while the other remained near the nest. This arrangement, while speculative, is consistent with the behavior of many modern birds, the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. Whether such cooperation was the rule or the exception, the investment in guarding and tending the eggs would have been immense. When the time for hatching approached, the calls of the young from within the eggs may have been met with low rumbles of reassurance from the parent. These deep, resonant sounds could have passed through the ground and the air, letting the hatchlings know that safety waited beyond the shell. Such communication, while impossible to prove, fits the pattern seen in both crocodilians and birds today. The arrival of the young marked the next phase of the cycle, a stage we have already glimpsed when we followed the early life of a tyrannosaur from egg to juvenile. But here, in the courtship and mating season, the focus is on the origins of that life, the moment when two giants, each the product of millions of years of evolution, came together in a fleeting alliance to ensure the continuation of their kind. In the grand arc of Cretaceous life, such moments of intimacy were rare and brief, but they were the foundation of the species' survival. Without them, the reign of Tyrannosaurus Rex would have ended in a single generation, and the fossil record would hold no trace of the mighty predators we know today. Yet life in this world was never without danger. Injuries, illness, and the constant risk of death were as much a part of the tyrant's existence as hunting or mating. In the next stage of our journey, we will turn our gaze to the struggles that even the king could not always avoid, the wounds, ailments, and narrow escapes that marked its life. Even for the king of the tyrant lizards, life in the late Cretaceous was a constant trial. Size, power, and predatory skill could not shield Tyrannosaurus Rex from every danger. The fossil record reveals a story written in scars, fractures that healed, bite marks that knitted over with bone, and deformities that speak of diseases endured rather than fled from. Behind the image of the unstoppable hunter lies the reality of a creature that, like all living things, lived on a razor's edge between strength and vulnerability. Imagine an adult T-Rex stalking across the open plain. Its stride is confident, its muscles fluid beneath thick skin, but hidden from casual view are the marks of a lifetime. A faint irregularity in the curve of the ribs, tells of a fracture suffered years earlier, perhaps from the horn of a defending Triceratops or the tail club of an Ankylosaurus. The bone has knitted, but it has done so unevenly, leaving a permanent reminder of the encounter. Paleontologists have uncovered skulls bearing deep gouges and puncture marks made by the teeth of other tyrannosaurs. These wounds were not instantly fatal. The bone shows signs of healing, but they hint at violent clashes over territory, mates, or kills. The jaws of a T-Rex could exert a force capable of crushing bone, so to survive such a bite was no small feat. It suggests an animal both resilient and tenacious, able to withstand agony and continue the fight for survival. Some injuries were more subtle, but no less significant. Studies of certain fossil specimens show signs of arthritis and fused vertebrae, conditions that would have caused pain and stiffness. An older T-Rex might have moved more slowly, relying on ambush or scavenging rather than full-speed pursuit. Age and injury could change the way a predator hunted, altering its role in the ecosystem and perhaps forcing it to compete in new ways. Disease also left its mark. One of the most fascinating examples comes from lesions found in the jawbones of some T-Rex fossils. These pitted, eroded areas resemble the effects of Trichomonas gallinae, a parasite that today infects birds such as pigeons and hawks. In modern birds, this disease creates lesions in the mouth and throat, making it difficult to feed. For a predator dependent on tearing and swallowing large chunks of meat, such an affliction could be fatal. Yet the fact that these lesions show signs of partial healing means that some individuals manage to survive the infection for a time. Parasitic infestations, bacterial infections, and injuries from prey all posed risks. But starvation remained the most relentless threat. An injury that slowed a T-Rex or a disease that weakened its bite could mean the difference between eating and going hungry. In such times, the scavenging abilities of the predator became critical. Even a weakened king could use its size and presence to drive smaller carnivores from a carcass, buying time to heal or regain strength. The process of healing in a creature of such size was likely slow but steady, with a metabolism somewhere between that of a cold-blooded reptile and a warm-blooded bird. T-Rex may have had the energy reserves to recover from injuries that would have killed smaller animals. Bone tissue would have gradually bridged fractures, muscles would have rebuilt with rest and cautious movement, and the predator's adaptable feeding strategies would have given it a fighting chance. But survival was not simply a matter of physical recovery. Injury and illness could alter behavior in lasting ways. A T-Rex that had been gored by a Triceratops horn might be more cautious in future hunts, preferring to target slower prey or using stealth rather than brute force. One that had suffered from a jaw infection might scavenge more frequently, avoiding the high risks of bringing down large, dangerous animals. Each wound told a story, shaping not only the body but the mind of the predator. In this way, the T-Rex was not just a creature of power, but a creature of adaptation. It could suffer a broken rib, a torn muscle, or a painful infection, and still remain a dominant force in its world. Its resilience was as much a part of its reign as its hunting skill. Even a limping king could rule, provided it was clever enough to adjust to its circumstances. The image of an ancient predator enduring hardship reminds us that the life of a T-Rex was not one long triumph. It was a sequence of challenges, some met with overwhelming strength, others with cunning, and still others endured through sheer determination. Every scar was a testament to survival in a world where no creature, no matter how mighty, was beyond the reach of misfortune. And yet, even in the shadow of these hardships, life went on. Each day was a blend of rest and movement, of hunger and satisfaction, of vigilance and moments of stillness. In the next part of our journey, we will step into a single day in the life of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a day filled with the ordinary rhythms and sudden dramas that defined existence for the greatest predator of its age. For millions of years, Tyrannosaurus Rex ruled the warm plains and forests of the late Cretaceous, a living apex of evolutionary design. Its world was one of cycles, wet seasons and dry, Births and deaths, hunts and quiet days beneath the shade of conifers. From the perspective of a single creature, nothing in that world suggested an ending. The sun rose, the herds moved, the hunt continued, and yet, 66 million years ago, the entire rhythm of life was abruptly and irreversibly broken. The first sign of disaster may not have been the sight of something falling from the sky, but a subtle change in the air. Winds shifted in strange ways. Sunlight took on a faint, unfamiliar quality. Somewhere far above, in the emptiness beyond the clouds, a 10-kilometer-wide asteroid was hurtling toward Earth at more than 70,000 kilometers per hour. It had been traveling for millions of years, unseen and unstoppable, and its path now crossed directly with the blue and green world below. When it struck, it did so with an energy greater than billions of nuclear explosions combined. The asteroid slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, creating the Chicxulub crater. The impact was instantaneous, but the consequences radiated outward like a shock wave through time itself. A flash of heat hotter than the surface of the sun ignited forests for thousands of kilometers around. Earthquakes rattled the land, and towering tsunamis raced across oceans, drowning coastlines in minutes. In the world of the Tyrannosaurus, the immediate effects would have been devastating but not yet final. Animals close to the impact zone perished instantly. Farther away, predators and prey alike were thrown into chaos. Herds scattered without direction. The air grew thick with smoke and ash, but it was what came in the days and months after that sealed the fate of the great reptiles. Dust and debris thrown high into the atmosphere began to encircle the globe. Sunlight dimmed, then failed entirely in many places, plunging the land into a twilight that lasted for months. Photosynthesis slowed to a halt. Plants withered, and with them, the great chains of life they supported began to collapse. The herbivores, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Ankylosaurus, found less and less to eat. Their numbers dwindled, and with them, the food supply of the predators. For a creature like T-Rex, this was a crisis without precedent. Its size, once a supreme advantage, now demanded enormous amounts of food in a world where prey had all but vanished. Hunger became a constant, gnawing force. Tyrannosaurs that had once stalked the plains with calculated patience were forced to wander farther, take greater risks, and even turn on one another in desperation. The cold followed, without the sun's warmth. Global temperatures dropped sharply. The once humid Cretaceous air turned chill, and seasons that had been mild became harsh and unforgiving. Young tyrannosaurs, once reliant on the abundance of the warm months to grow quickly, now faced starvation long before reaching maturity. Fossil evidence suggests that smaller, more adaptable creatures weathered the catastrophe better: birds, which are the living descendants of dinosaurs, and mammals, which could survive on seeds, insects, and stored food. But for giants like Tyrannosaurus Rex, whose entire existence was built on a delicate balance of abundant prey, vast territory, and stable climate, the shift was catastrophic. It is tempting to picture the final days of the species as a dramatic, singular moment, the last T-Rex standing alone on a barren plain. The truth was likely slower, more drawn out. Over perhaps thousands of years after the impact, the population dwindled, each death unremarkable in itself, but part of an irreversible decline. One by one, the great predators fell to starvation, injury, or the sheer absence of the world they had once ruled. And yet, even in imagining their end, there is a certain dignity in the thought that they persisted for as long as they did, through fire and darkness, through the collapse of entire ecosystems. The Tyrannosaurus Rex endured until endurance was no longer possible. In their absence, the world shifted into a new age, the age of mammals, but their bones remained, buried in layers of rock, waiting to tell their story millions of years later. The end of the Tyrannosaurus was not merely the loss of a species, but the closing of an entire chapter in Earth's history. The end of the Mesozoic era. The roar of the king fell silent, but in the silence that followed, a new chorus began to rise. And yet, the fossil record does not leave us only with their death. It leaves us with the echoes of their life. The preserved footprints in ancient mud, the healed wounds in bone, the imprints of teeth that speak of battles fought and won. The story of T-Rex is not just the story of its extinction, but of the millions of years it thrived before that final cataclysm. From here, our journey turns to those echoes, the fossilized remains that allow us to reconstruct not only the body of the tyrant lizard king, but the very world it inhabited. When the last Tyrannosaurus Rex took its final breath, it left no conscious record of its passing. There was no witness to speak of the end, no written memory to capture its final moments. And yet, the Earth itself became the storyteller, layer upon layer of sediment, laid down over millions of years, preserved the bones of the king and the world it once ruled. These remains, fragments of skull, teeth, ribs, and tails, would lie hidden in silence until, by chance or curiosity, human hands uncovered them once more. Fossilization is not a quick or guaranteed process. For most creatures, death is followed swiftly by decay, scavenging, and the dispersal of bones. But in rare cases, conditions align to create a time capsule. Perhaps a T-Rex collapsed near a riverbank, its body settling into the soft mud. Over time, floods covered it with silt, sealing it away from scavengers. Minerals seeped into the bones, replacing the original material while retaining their shape. The flesh and skin vanished, but the hard structures, teeth, bones, claws, remained, slowly turning to stone. These silent monuments to the past can remain buried for tens of millions of years, awaiting the right combination of erosion, exposure, and human curiosity to return them to the light. When we uncover them, we are not simply finding bones. We are touching the deep past, connecting across a gulf of time almost beyond comprehension. The first scientific description of a Tyrannosaurus Rex came in 1905, when paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn named the species from fossils found in Montana. But fragments of tyrannosaurs had been found earlier, misidentified or misunderstood. It was only as more complete skeletons emerged from the ground that the true form of the king began to take shape in human understanding. Among the most famous discoveries is Sioux, a remarkably complete specimen unearthed in South Dakota in 1990. Sioux's skeleton is over 90% complete, offering an unprecedented look at the anatomy of the species. Each bone tells a part of her story: healed injuries that speak of battles survived, massive teeth that confirm her place at the top of the food chain, and a frame that suggests she may have been among the largest T-Rex individuals ever known. Today, Sioux resides in the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, inspiring awe in millions of visitors. Then there is Stan, discovered in South Dakota in 1987, whose bones have been studied, replicated, and displayed in museums across the globe. Stan's skull in particular revealed new details about the powerful jaw mechanics and sensory adaptations of T-Rex. Together, Sioux and Stan have become ambassadors of the species, their remains telling the story of life, death, and preservation across unimaginable spans of time. But not every fossil is a complete skeleton. Many finds are single teeth, thick, conical, and serrated, shed naturally during feeding or left behind when a predator fell. These isolated pieces are still invaluable, offering insights into diet, hunting behavior, and even the age of the animal. Some teeth show wear patterns or microscopic scratches that reveal what kinds of food the predator consumed. Other fossils preserve trace evidence rather than the animal itself. Footprints, pressed into mud millions of years ago and turned to stone, show us the size of the animal's stride, the weight distribution in its steps, and even moments of behavior. A sudden turn, a chase, a pause. These trackways are like snapshots of movement, frozen mid-step and carried across the ages. In recent years, technology has opened new doors in the study of T-Rex fossils. CT scanning allows scientists to look inside bones without damaging them, revealing the structure of the brain case, the arrangement of sinuses, and the density of muscle attachment points. Chemical analysis can detect traces of proteins, helping to reconstruct what the animal's flesh might have been like and how it metabolized energy. There is even ongoing research into whether microscopic remnants of soft tissue can survive for tens of millions of years, a discovery that, if confirmed, would push the boundaries of what we believe possible in fossil preservation. The fossil record also reveals the broader context of T-Rex's world. In the same rock layers as the predator's bones, we find the remains of its prey, Triceratops frills with puncture wounds, hadrosaur vertebrae bearing healed bite marks, and the armor plates of Ankylosaurus with damage consistent with a powerful bite. These connections are not hypothetical. They are direct physical evidence of predator-prey interactions that happened in real time, long before our species walked the Earth. Yet the record is far from complete. Every fossil we find is a fragment of a much larger puzzle. Whole lifetimes have vanished without leaving a single trace. The T-Rex we know is reconstructed, not from a perfect archive, but from scattered, weathered chapters pieced together with care and inference. Each new discovery adds detail, but also raises new questions. How did they hunt in groups or alone? How far did they travel? How much variation existed between individuals? The search for answers continues in the Badlands of Montana, the rocky exposures of Alberta, the windswept hills of South Dakota, and beyond. Fossil hunters, both professional paleontologists and skilled amateurs, walk for hours under the blazing sun, scanning the ground for the telltale gleam of fossilized bone or the unusual texture of ancient stone. When a new find emerges, it is carefully excavated, documented, and transported to laboratories where the work of cleaning, preserving, and studying it can take years. In the end, the fossil record does more than tell us what Tyrannosaurus Rex looked like. It connects us to a world long gone, a reminder that Earth has been home to creatures both familiar and alien, terrifying and beautiful. Every fossil is a voice from that ancient world, and together they speak of a predator whose reign was long, whose presence was felt across continents, and whose legacy endures in stone. From the ground where it was buried, the story of the king rises again, not in flesh and blood, but in knowledge, inspiring the next generation to keep searching. And as we listen to those ancient echoes, we begin to understand why the Tyrannosaurus Rex has never truly left us. But fossils alone cannot explain why this predator has captured human imagination like no other. For that, we must step into the realm of culture, myth, and modern science, into the legacy of the tyrant lizard king in our own time. When Henry Fairfield Osborn first named Tyrannosaurus Rex in 1905, he could not have known that the fossilized bones before him would grow into one of the most iconic symbols of prehistoric life. In the century since, the tyrant lizard king has risen far beyond the realm of paleontology, planting its massive three-toed footprint in popular culture, education, and the collective imagination of humankind. The fascination begins perhaps with the sheer drama of its form, the deep, robust skull lined with serrated teeth, the muscular legs, the sweeping tail. These features combine to create an animal that is both alien and eerily familiar, a predator that seems purpose-built for dominance. Children learn the name long before they understand the science. It becomes a gateway into the deep past, an introduction to a world where monsters were real. From the earliest museum displays, T-Rex was an instant draw. The first mounted skeletons, towering over visitors, were arranged in dramatic poses, often rearing upright in a posture we now know was inaccurate, but no less captivating to the public. These displays brought the bones to life, turning stone into story. Even today, when reconstructions have shifted toward a more accurate, horizontal stance, the effect remains the same, tinged with the quiet realization that Earth's history stretches far beyond our own species. Then came the leap from the museum to the movie screen. In the early 20th century, stop-motion models brought T-Rex to life in black and white adventures, their movements jerky but unforgettable. Later, in the age of digital effects, it became the star of blockbuster films, the thundering centerpiece of chase scenes, the roaring emblem of primeval power. These portrayals, while often scientifically outdated or exaggerated, cemented the dinosaur as the undisputed monarch of prehistoric storytelling. Yet T-Rex's cultural legacy is not limited to spectacle. It has been a catalyst for science, inspiring generations of paleontologists to enter the field. Many researchers trace their fascination back to a childhood encounter with a T-Rex skeleton in a museum or an illustration in a dinosaur book. This enduring appeal has ensured funding for digs, research, and educational programs that extend far beyond a single species. In this way, the predator's legacy feeds directly into our expanding knowledge of the natural world. The king also serves as a benchmark in paleontology, a creature against which others are measured. New fossil discoveries often find themselves compared to T-Rex. Was it larger, faster, more heavily armed? Even other apex predators from different eras like Spinosaurus or Giganotosaurus are inevitably weighed against the tyrant lizard king in a kind of prehistoric rivalry that plays out in headlines and scientific papers alike. Beyond the bones, T-Rex has shaped how we think about evolution, adaptation, and extinction. It is a reminder that even the most dominant species can vanish when the world changes too quickly. In classrooms, it becomes a teaching tool for explaining the processes of fossilization, the dynamics of ecosystems, and the reality of mass extinctions. In this way, it is not just a relic of the past, but a living part of how we understand life itself. In popular art, the predator's image is endlessly reimagined. Painters, illustrators, and digital artists have depicted it in every conceivable scene, battling triceratops, stalking through rain-soaked forests, roaring atop rocky outcrops under stormy skies. These visions range from gritty realism to stylized fantasy, each adding another layer to its mythos. Even in playful or comedic portrayals, the sheer recognizability of the silhouette, the massive head, the small forearms, the long tail, ensures that no introduction is needed. Merchandise bearing its likeness spans the globe. Toys, models, clothing, even postage stamps carry the image of the king. For many children, their first dinosaur figurine is a T-Rex, its jaws forever open in a silent roar. This commercial presence keeps the animal in everyday awareness, bridging generations as parents pass along their fascination to their children. But perhaps the most enduring part of its legacy lies in the tension between what we know and what we imagine. Science continues to refine our picture of T-Rex, discovering new details about its growth, senses, and behavior, yet mysteries remain. Did it hunt in coordinated groups or largely alone? How much of its body was covered in scales versus feathers? What exactly did its call sound like? Each question leaves room for curiosity, inviting the public to imagine, speculate, and in doing so, keep the creature alive in the mind's eye. This blend of certainty and wonder is why T-Rex's legacy endures while countless other prehistoric animals fade into obscurity. It is a species that connects the tangible, fossilized bone, measurable bite force, mapped muscle structure, with the intangible, the thrill of imagining a living giant striding across a wild, ancient world. In the century since its discovery, the Tyrannosaurus Rex has gone from being a collection of stone fragments to an icon recognized by billions. It has leapt from the dusty strata of the Hell Creek Formation to museum halls, movie screens, and the dreams of countless people around the world. It stands as both a symbol of what once was and a reminder of how much remains to be discovered. And yet, for all the ways it has been adapted, reinterpreted, and celebrated, the real T-Rex was more than any single depiction can capture. To understand its true greatness, we must step back from the reconstructions and the roaring movie scenes and reflect on what it taught us about survival, power, and the fragility of life. That reflection will guide us into our final part, a moment to step away from the facts and figures, and to listen instead for the deeper message left behind in the footprints and fossils of the king. The story of Tyrannosaurus Rex is not simply about teeth, claws, and dominance. It is a story about time itself, about the rise and fall of creatures shaped by the slow, unrelenting forces of evolution. It is a reminder that Earth's history is far larger than our own, and that even the mightiest rulers are subject to the laws of change. From the moment of its hatching, a T-Rex lived in a world that demanded both adaptability and precision. It was an animal shaped by its ecosystem, by the herds it hunted, the rivals it challenged, the seasons it endured. Its every feature, from the forward-facing eyes to the powerful tail, was the result of millions of years of refinement. And yet, even this perfection of predatory design could not stand against a sudden global catastrophe. In that way, the T-Rex teaches one of nature's oldest lessons: dominance is temporary. The balance of life can be shifted by forces far beyond the control of any creature, by climate, by geology, by events from the depths of space. To rule in one age is no guarantee of survival in the next. But its story is not one of failure. If anything, it is one of profound success. For more than 2 million years, Tyrannosaurus Rex thrived as an apex predator. It adapted to shifting climates, changing prey populations, and the constant challenges of competition. It was a keystone species, shaping the behavior and evolution of the animals around it. Its disappearance was not the result of weakness, but of a world transformed in an instant. In its legacy, we find another lesson, one about curiosity and connection. The fossils of T-Rex do not simply sit behind glass. They spark wonder. They remind us that life's story is written in stone as much as in the living creatures around us. Every footprint preserved in ancient mud, every tooth with its serrated edge still sharp after millions of years, is a message from a time so distant it feels almost like another world. It teaches us to think in scales of time that dwarf our everyday lives. The stretch between the reign of the T-Rex and the present is longer than the distance between its age and that of the earliest dinosaurs. To grasp such spans is to realize how brief our own species' story has been, and how much of Earth's history remains outside our direct experience. And yet, for all that distance, there is something recognizable in the life of the tyrant lizard king. The need to find food, to defend territory, to reproduce. These are drives we see in animals today. The caution of a wounded hunter, the determination of a parent guarding a nest, the opportunism of a scavenger. These are patterns older than humanity, carried forward through countless forms of life. Perhaps that is why T-Rex has such a hold on us. In it, we see both the alien and the familiar. We see the vastness of evolutionary possibility and the simple universal truths of survival. We see a creature that, though it lived in a world utterly unlike ours, played out struggles that echo in the wild places of the modern Earth. In the end, the greatest lesson of T-Rex may be humility. The Earth has produced forms of life more powerful, stranger, and more enduring than we can easily imagine, and it will continue to do so long after we are gone. The king's reign ended, but life went on, adapting and reshaping itself into new forms. In its fossils, we see not an ending, but a chapter in a story that is still being written. These echoes in the earth remind us that to understand life today, we must listen to the voices of the past, even when they speak from bones turned to stone, lying in silence for millions of years. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is one such voice, telling us of power, of fragility, and of the extraordinary beauty of a world long vanished. And now, as our journey with the king draws to its close, we can take those lessons with us into our own lives, our own time, and into the quiet moments when we look out at the living world and feel the weight of the ages behind it. And so our long walk alongside the king of the tyrant lizards comes to an end. We have followed the Tyrannosaurus Rex from the warmth of the nesting ground, through the endless demands of the hunt, into the rivalries and dangers of its world. We have stood in the shadow of its skull, felt the precision of its senses, and watched the rhythm of its daily life unfold beneath the ancient Cretaceous sun. We have seen its triumphs, its scars, and at last, the quiet finality of its extinction. In these echoes from deep time, we have found more than just the story of a predator. We have found a reminder of life's cycles of growth, change, and the inevitability of endings. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was the very image of strength, yet it too was part of the great, unbroken chain of life that has always been shaped by forces greater than any single creature. Its bones, now turned to stone, rest as markers in the earth, pages in a book written long before we arrived. They tell us of a world that was at once fierce and beautiful, where power was matched by resilience, and where every day was a negotiation between hunger, danger, and survival. As the soft lo-fi music plays us out tonight, let the weight of this story settle gently in your mind. The king is gone, but its lessons remain, about adaptability, about respect for the natural world, and about our place in a history that stretches far beyond our own lives. Close your eyes now, and let the sound of the ancient plains fill your thoughts, the whisper of ferns in the breeze, the distant rumble of footsteps, the deep, resonant call of a hunter claiming its domain. These are the voices of a time long past, still speaking to us across millions of years. Good night, and may your dreams carry you back to that primeval world where the shadow of the Tyrannosaurus Rex still moves across the land.